Capitol Corridor? What's All right, I will call this meeting of the Albany City Council to order. Councilmember Lopez, can you please read the land acknowledgement?
Yes. The City of Albany recognizes that we occupy the land originally protected by the Confederated Villages of Lejeune. We acknowledge the genocide that took place on these lands and must make strides to repay the moral debt that is owed to this indigenous people, specifically the Ohlone tribe. We thank them for their contributions, which have transformed our community and will continue to bring forth growth and unity. The City of Albany commits to sustaining an ongoing relationship with the tribe and together build a better future for all that now make this their home.
Thank you. City Clerk, can you please call the roll?
Councilmember Hanson Romero.
Here.
Councilmember Jordan.
Here.
Councilmember Lopez.
Here.
Vice Mayor Mickey.
Here.
And Mayor Tiedemann.
Here. And before we get on to our main ceremonial item, I wanted to say two things. First of all, we don't have a ton of attendees, but to everyone here, Shana Tova, it is the Jewish New Year as of this weekend. So for anyone celebrating Rosh Hashanah, sweet New Year. I also wanted to mention that we put out a mayor's statement today. As I'm sure most people in the city are aware by now, a book has come out about the unfortunate incidents at Albany High School a couple of years ago. We were also featured in the New York Times Magazine. So I wanted to highlight some of the work that we've been doing to try and make our city more inclusive with standing up the RISE Commission, the Policing Commission, launching our mental health crisis response pilot, and getting our racial equity survey underway. So I appreciate all the work that's gone into that from everybody here, as well from city staff. We will continue these efforts, and I also wanted to thank everybody at the school board, Superintendent Frank Wells, and the Albany High Principal, Darren McNally, for all they've done. If anyone's interested in reading and discussing Accountable, the Albany Reads program at the Albany Library will be taking it up this fall. I know they have a discussion on January 24th at the Little Theater, and they'll have more scheduling and events for that, so check their site for updates. With that, we will move to our proclamation, which is in honor of Albany's 115th anniversary, and I will go and read. Proclamation celebrating the City of Albany's 115th anniversary of incorporation on September 22nd, 2023. Whereas the City of Albany was incorporated on September 22nd, 1908, whereas Albany today is a family-friendly and vibrant city that is economically and culturally diverse with walkable neighborhoods and thriving businesses, outstanding schools, and an active community. And whereas the city's first known residents, a tribe of Native Americans known as the Costanoans or Ohlone, lived in the area, including at the base of Albany Hill along Cerrito Creek. And whereas the Albany City Council has adopted a land acknowledgement to recognize the city's first known residents that is read at the beginning of each public meeting as follows. The City of Albany recognizes that we occupy the land originally protected by the Confederated Villages of Lishan. We acknowledge the genocide that took place on these lands and must make strides to repay the moral debt that is owed to this indigenous people, specifically the Ohlone tribe. We thank them for their contributions, which have transformed our community and will continue to bring forth growth and unity. The City of Albany commits to sustaining ongoing relationships with the tribe and together build a better future for all that now make this their home. And whereas in 1908, area residents protested the dumping of Berkeley garbage in their community by incorporating and became the City of Ocean View. And whereas in 1909, the name of the city was changed to Albany in honor of the birthplace of the city's first mayor, Mayor Frank Roberts. And whereas in 1927, Albany voters adopted the city's first charter, giving full control over it to its own governance. And whereas the City of Albany is a sanctuary city committed to protecting the rights of all people in our community. And whereas the Albany City Council has adopted a mission statement that reads, Albany is committed to providing a healthy, safe, and accessible city and strives to lift every voice in our community. And whereas Albany remains a unique and welcoming place that celebrates all members of the community and includes one-of-a-kind businesses, inviting parks and open spaces, and fosters a strong sense of community and civic pride. And whereas September 18th to 24th, 2023 marks the city's annual Albany Local Week to support and celebrate the amazing businesses, parks, attractions, and uniqueness of our city for one entire week. And whereas on September 20th, the city will hold an evening concert in the park to celebrate Albany's 115th anniversary of incorporation. Now, therefore, be it proclaimed that the Albany City Council acknowledges all residents, businesses, visitors, community members, and staff for their contributions to our city and encourages all to celebrate the City of Albany on its 115th anniversary of incorporation. There's no one to present this to because it's presenting to everybody in the city. With that, are there any council members who would like to make comment on this item?
I'm just curious how the city governed itself without a charter for 19 years. If the first charter was 1927.
Do we know?
What did it
Will be
do?
Common law?
Because there was no general law then, I don't think. Do we have the 1927 charter?
I think I have a copy in my office.
Oh, wow. It'd be great to scan it, put it online.
I have it scanned. I didn't put it online.
All right, I'll ask for it on the down low.
Any further comments from council? Seeing none.
Happy birthday, Albany.
Happy birthday, Albany. Looking good for 115. We'll move to the city manager's report. The city manager's report will cover things of interest to the council, and then we'll have public comment.
Thank you, Mayor. As just stated in the proclamation, we are celebrating the start of Albany Local Week with opportunities throughout the week. It's going to be a busy week for those attending the events. Looking forward to all that are listed. You can get more information at albanyca.org/Albany Local Week. These include a concert in the park to celebrate Albany's 115th anniversary of incorporation with free dessert and a great local band that we are proud to have in our park. So come join us at 5:30. That will be this Wednesday evening at Memorial Park. In addition, we will be celebrating the Best of Albany in support of the Albany Chamber of Commerce. This is the awards gala, which will be held at Belmont Village, right next door, 1100 San Pablo Avenue, this Thursday from 6 to 8. It's a program presented by the Chamber of Commerce to recognize our local businesses, organizations, and people. Also, tomorrow night, not exactly a festivity, but a learning opportunity we have a street lighting workshop that will be held tomorrow evening, 6 p.m., meeting at the Senior Center for a tour of street lighting options as we move forward with the analysis of street lighting and how to improve it throughout the city. We are proud to be initiating the Phase 7 project for sidewalk repairs. So that means we've done 7 significant repair projects over the course of the last few years. The property map where all of the locations will be repaired, as well as overall information to the sidewalk program, are actively listed on our website with a map of all the locations for this particular phase. We also just started the pavement maintenance project last week. This is a significant improvement project throughout the city in several different areas of the city. You can see it on the map displayed here, which is also included on our website under the project updates tab. Basically providing a protective coating on several streets to help maintain those that are in reasonable enough shape to extend their lifetime for a few more years going forward. Really appreciate the forward thinking of our Public Works Department in extending this slurry seal project throughout the city in such a thoughtful way. If you look up while you're walking around on San Pablo and soon on Solano, and also through our entryway here, at least by Friday, not quite yet, we are proud to announce that we've replaced some rather tattered banners with these new vibrant banners. The ones closer to the entryways will be the welcome banners, and then either San Pablo or Solano will be adorned by those depicted on the screen here. So looking forward to getting those installed on short order. It took some design work, but we're thrilled with the outcome, and appreciation to Brennan Brown, our economic development and assistant to the city manager, for leading and spearheading this work. And that completes my report. Thank you.
Thank you for that report. I'm glad to see new banners are up. Is there any comments or questions from council? Seeing none, we will go to the public. This is for questions about the city manager's report. Commenters will have 1 minute in which to ask about that.
No one person.
Okay. That brings us to good of the city. This is for persons desiring to address the council on an item that is not on the agenda. You have 3 minutes. Due to the Brown Act, we are limited in our ability to discuss items that are not on the agenda, so therefore such items will be referred to staff for comment or for a future agenda item for further discussion. In this and all other comments, please speak to the council and maintain respect for us, staff, and anyone else, as we want everyone to feel comfortable while commenting. Do we have anyone online?
No one raised their hand.
Okay. That brings us to our consent calendar. Consent calendar items are considered to be routine by the City Council and be enacted by one motion unless otherwise stated. By approval, we adopt the staff recommendations, and there will be no separate discussion on any items that are not requested for discussion by an audience member or a member of the council. Are there any members of the council who wish to pull an item for separate discussion? Seeing none, is there any member of the public who would wish to pull an item for separate discussion?
No.
I'll move the consent calendar.
It's been,
Sorry, I'll second.
thank you. It has been moved and seconded. City Clerk, can we please have the roll?
Vice Mayor Mickey,
Yes.
Mayor Tiedemann,
Yes.
Councilmember Hanson Romero,
Yes.
Councilmember Jordan,
Yes.
Councilmember Lopez.
Yes.
The motion carries.
Thank you. That brings us to our presentation, 8.1, which is an economic development program update.
I'm gonna try and, oh yeah, I went through an AV training with, oh, it's
going now. All right. All right. Oh no, this is yours. All right. I'm gonna. Can we? I'm just gonna give this one a try. Ready? All right. Share screen. It's not. Oh, there we go. All right. So, just gonna get situated. Council, thank you for allowing me to present this evening. I'm Brennan Brown, Assistant to the City Manager, and I've been with the city since 2014, and my primary roles since 2021 has been with economic development and public information. Today I'm going to talk about our economic development programs. So there's been an increased focus on supporting the Albany business community for the last several years. City Council made economic development a priority, and staff has taken that and created economic development programs from a humble beginning to what I'm excited to show you today. The Office of Economic Development is now a resource for businesses to come to. And as just an aside, I also wanted to mention that in 2021, as a response to more focus on economic development, the city retained Montauk Consulting for economic development consulting services. John Montauk of Montauk Consulting has 27 years of experience as an economic development professional. In addition, he lives in the community and served on the Economic Development Committee. Montauk Consulting has been integral in developing our economic development programs. And so at this point, we're in a phase now where we're starting to collaborate with stakeholders, and that's something we'll look to do more in the coming year. So I'm going to recap some of the programs that we developed in 2021 and 2023. Albany is hearing and proactively responding to the needs of the businesses, and we're taking a multifaceted approach. One of the aspects is one of our approaches is communication with the businesses, and so that includes responses to specific requests and in kind of any method the business needs, so in person, over the phone, through email, and we try to make it at their availability because we know how busy our businesses are. And we've also introduced 4 grant programs customized to the needs expressed by businesses and which are responsive to current issues. We've done a range of promotions such as banners, brochures, promotions through news outlets and social media. And we started providing informational resources that can always be accessed through our economic development website. So I want to start with communication, which is one of the pillars we started with and will always be doing throughout this process. We've been conducting one-on-one meetings with businesses and commercial brokers since 2021. In the last year, businesses communicated the following needs: more collaboration between businesses, the need to fill vacant spaces, and improve the look of the commercial areas. And we're working to accomplish these goals. These one-on-one meetings led to us assisting Picnic's Holiday Maker Fair last year, which was a nice community event that had a particular economic development focus. We also have our business e-news, which provides information and resources as needed. Examples of the type of resources we offered include information on East Bay Small Business Development Center trainings, information on IRS webinars on tax filing, and information on low-interest loans, which was something that some of our businesses were interested in finding out more about. Our next business e-news will provide information on ADA compliance for businesses from a certified access specialist. We also help in navigating the permit process. The Office of Economic Development can be a business's point of contact with the city. If the business has any questions, it's important to reach out to us because we can connect them with other city departments more efficiently. So examples are community development is where you go for conditional use permits. Finance department is where you go for a business license. Recreation and community services can provide assistance in reaching the community and partnering on events. And so these are things that businesses may not know, so we try to have all the businesses reach out to economic development first, and we can essentially be a conduit to access these city services. Surveys have also played an important part in the information gathering. In 2021, we conducted a survey that helped us better understand what businesses needed and what type of assistance they thought would be best. That's how we first identified interest in grants being offered through the city. We also conducted a survey in 2022 for both businesses and community members that helped to assess the interest in continuing the Parklet program. So, as I mentioned before, we introduced 4 one-time grants funded by American Rescue Plan Act funds, also known as ARPA. And you'll be receiving a full presentation on ARPA funding at the next council meeting. So the first grant we introduced was the COVID Small Business Assistance Grant. The purpose of the grant was to support Albany businesses highly impacted by the pandemic, especially in regard to preventing closures. This grant, reviewed and approved by City Council, opened its submission window on April 8, 2022, and closed on May 20, 2022. We did outreach to our businesses through email, social media, and in-person visits. Over 60 small businesses impacted by the pandemic received support from the city with grants up to $20,000 per eligible business. And since distributing the grants, only one eligible business has permanently closed, so we think the grant served its purpose in business retention. We also introduced the Window and Door Repair Grant earlier this year. This grant was established to support businesses impacted by an increase in crimes of vandalism and break-ins over the winter months. All Albany businesses with storefront properties were able to apply for up to $2,500 in reimbursement funds on repairs to windows and doors damaged due to vandalism and break-ins. And then the Parklet grant that we currently have is intended to assist businesses with parklets and the business community as a whole by offering financial support to bring the parklets up to code, both in design and safety compliance. This will assist with the beautification of Solano Avenue and make the parklet safer and more accessible for everyone. And just a side note, we've started issuing permits for construction, and so that process is, it's been a long time coming, but we're moving through it, and we're happy with how things are moving now. And our newest grant is the Business Attraction and Improvement Grant. The purpose of this grant program is to attract new businesses in Albany, fill vacant spaces in commercial areas, and give business owners financial support to overcome startup and facility upgrade costs as they look to grow their businesses in Albany. This grant is currently only available to businesses moving into a new space, but will broaden to include current Albany businesses looking to upgrade their locations. And the grant programs, all 4 of them, have been well received with a total of $1,022,000 and $1,022,190 approved to be awarded to local businesses, equating to a total of 86 grant awards to date. Another program that we introduced last year was the Albany e-gift card program, which is also an ARPA-funded program. We introduced this during Albany Local Week last September, and 45 businesses are participating, and it's free for the businesses to participate. And the idea of this is to kick off the program and encourage community members to support local businesses. The city offered a buy one, get one matching offer to customers, also known as a BOGO. That matching offer sold out in the first 24 hours. And then another BOGO matching offer was introduced over the holidays last year, and that matching offer sold out within 2 weeks. The first offer was 250 community members were able to make a BOGO purchase, and the second offer, 1,000 community members were able to make a BOGO purchase. And as of today, $110,000 have been redeemed at Albany businesses directly from this program. So one thing that was important for us to introduce was a website dedicated to economic development. The economic development website we created is called www.choosealbany.org. It offers resources for businesses that are currently in Albany or looking to relocate to Albany. It was introduced last year in September 2022. For current businesses, there's information on licensing and permitting, demographic data and consumer insights, and helpful resources with links to local organizations that support businesses. And for new and potential businesses, there's information on how to start a business in Albany, commercial districts in Albany, information on the advantages of starting a business in Albany, and there's also a link to Albany's Zoom Prospector site. And zoomprospector.com is where you can go to find out what commercial properties are available in Albany, as well as Albany Consumer Insights. Examples of consumer insights are demographic data and labor force data. And the Choose Albany website since January has had an average of 70 unique visitors per month. However, with the recent advertising we've been doing, which I'll go into more detail later in the presentation, there was an increase to 359 unique visitors in the last 30 days. And then we've also introduced 2 brochures this year. I have a couple copies of them. We have the Welcome brochure, which serves as an introduction to new businesses. It includes key information about the city and population, as well as contact information to services and local business organizations. We also have an attraction brochure intended to attract new, relocating, or expanding businesses to Albany. So this also includes key information about the city and population, but geared more toward attracting new businesses, as well as information about the grant program for new businesses. The intent of these brochures are to be proactive and have key information to provide to businesses and commercial real estate brokers. These resources have information that brokers can digest, so Albany is in the conversation with its larger neighboring cities. Albany has a great story to tell, and these help show that. So, as we mentioned earlier, we have new street banners that are coming. They're being installed in Albany on San Pablo, Solano, and Buchanan. The installation should be completed this week. I think the 21st is what they said was the latest update. And this installation is a larger project because the equipment that holds the banners also needs to be replaced. However, once that equipment replacement occurs, it's designed to last 20 years. So hopefully that happens. We have at least a 7-year warranty, so we're good there. It was funded by ARPA under the Business Assistance Program as well. And we're also taking a new approach to street banners, where we'll plan to rotate sets of banners out every 6 months. So the plan is to have 2 to 3 different sets of designs that rotate. And the purpose of these specific banners are to advertise commercial areas, greet Albany community members, introduce more vibrant colors to the street, and encourage shopping and dining in Albany. So we're now in a phase where we're advertising our programs more to the broader public. Examples of things we've done are sponsored stories, banner ads in local news sites, and sharing news about Albany businesses. Going into more detail in the news articles, the city put together a sponsored story which appeared in both Berkeley side and Oakland side at the end of August to advertise Albany's commercial areas to customers and attract new businesses. We also scheduled rotational media to appear in Berkeley side and Oakland side. Examples are on the slide right there. So we have Expand Your Business, Shop Albany, Dine Albany. And we also keep a pulse on good articles, social media posts, and stories about Albany businesses to share. A few examples of that. So San Francisco Chronicle has a Best Day Ever series, which we politely asked them, we said, Albany is a great place, and you should have your best day ever here. And they said, well, think about it. And then last year they did it. So we advertised that in e-news, we advertised that on social media, and it just ended up being a nice story to kind of share with our residents. More recently, we have an ice cream shop that was recently rated as one of the best ice cream shops in the Bay Area, according to the SF Chronicle. And one of our restaurants made the top 5 burgers list in California by Michelin Guide. So that was another thing that we advertised in our social media. So I want to take a moment to talk about some of our partner organizations that Albany depends on them to better assist our business community. And so I just want to mention some of them. The Albany Chamber of Commerce works to strengthen and enhance all the business districts in the city of Albany. And as mentioned, this Thursday for Albany Local Week, they'll be hosting the Best of Albany Awards Gala, where they'll recognize many of Albany's businesses and as selected by voter submissions. And I also serve as a non-voting member on the chamber. It's a great way to share and receive information on the business community. The Solano Avenue Association supports Albany and Berkeley businesses on Solano Avenue. As you well know, they had their Solano Avenue stroll, which I've only heard great things about. Unfortunately, I had to have my PIO hat on, so I wasn't able to attend, but I've heard great things from it. And I've heard, I mean, I think that some of from what I've heard, it was just packed this year, more than last year. It was quite successful. So just want to give them a shout out because that's a lot of work that goes into that. The East Bay Small Business Development Center offers a variety of free services, one-on-one advising, as an example, finance advising, training webinars on things like marketing and creating a business plan. So I attended a few of those webinars just to find out the type of information they specifically provided and found them to be filled with helpful resources and tips. And the East Bay Works, this organization helps connect businesses with job seekers. So they also offer training services to job seekers. For our county, the organization that businesses can reach out to is the Alameda County Workforce Development Board. Albany is also a member of regional and national economic development organizations. The East Bay Economic Development Alliance, also known as East Bay EDA, is an organization that is comprised of members in both Alameda County and Contra Costa County. Their purpose is to serve as the regional voice and networking resource for strengthening the economy, building the workforce, and enhancing the quality of life in the East Bay. They have quarterly meetings for local government staff, in economic development, which I attend, and they also offer free webinars for members, which provides information on the economy and specific business sectors. There's also the California Association for Local Economic Development, also known as CalEd, and they're similar to the East Bay except for the whole state. And there's also ICSC, Innovating Commerce Serving Communities, which is a national organization focused primarily on retail, and they offer resources and data primarily on that. These organizations are helpful in terms of providing a broader perspective on economic development and seeing what other cities and organizations are doing. So what's next for economic development? The way I've approached it so far is in phases. Phase 1 occurred in 2021 and 2022. It primarily involved information gathering from local businesses, business organizations, and communication with other cities. We also assessed past economic development programs and projects and began the process of developing new ones. Phase 2 occurred in 2022 and 2023. It focused on further developing programs as well as implementing and administering developed programs. And phase 3, we're starting now, it focuses on advertising our programs in commercial areas as well as on attracting businesses to fill vacant commercial spaces. A little more on phase 3, we'll continue to work with and collaborate with Albany's businesses and continue to schedule one-on-one conversations to address their needs. On filling commercial vacancies, we've been conducting annual assessments on ground floor commercial vacancies, the last one done in May of this year. And we're working to find businesses that complement the ones that are currently here, and in doing so, attract businesses that add to the commercial areas. We want to make Albany top of mind, and to do that, we plan to work with the press to further advertise things businesses are doing in Albany and further advertise our programs. We also will continue to communicate with brokers in the Bay Area, so when they're thinking of locations for their clients, Albany is in the conversation. We've already started the process of offering our services with the goal of attracting new businesses. Two that are coming in 2024 are Hella Bagel, coming to 1019 San Pablo Avenue, and Best Friends, which is a bottle shop featuring natural wines and craft beer, coming to the corner of Solano and San Pablo. For Best Friends, we specifically worked with them to help expedite the permit process to obtain a conditional use permit. And also looking at a comparison between businesses now versus prior to the pandemic, I wanted to provide some additional information. So there are 2 less active business licenses in the eating and drinking places category in 2023 compared to 2019. And there are 3 more active business licenses in the retail category in 2023 compared to 2019. And the numbers between 2019 and now are pretty similar, and we're going to look to increase those moving forward. So with that, I'd be happy to take questions, and thank you for allowing me to present on Albany economic development programs.
Thank you for that presentation and all the work.
Thank you.
Are there any questions from council?
I sent some questions over, and I'm really impressed that you managed to fit them all in 8 hours or less.
Thank
all the data I asked for, I'm always onto the data and the metrics.
I also want to thank the finance staff because they have the business license information and they put together the spreadsheet to make that possible. And now I have another resource that I can use in sort of assessing where we are.
Yeah, monitor, because I thought it's
Exactly.
great data because the city's already collecting it. So just a little analysis. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I don't have any more questions. I just want to say it's an impressive amount of work that you've done and other staff. Yeah.
Any other questions?
Sorry, just more of a comment. I appreciate letting us know that we have one of the top 5 burger shops and that we have an ice cream shop that's gotten written up. I might send you an email to get the specifics on that, but I think in that vein, I think it's helpful as I talk with the community or as I represent Albany outside to have some more numbers on kind of the diversity of shops that we have. And so I don't know if that's something that you all are tracking, but just the diversity of restaurants that we have or the diversity of small businesses that we have, both in kind of what they sell, but also perhaps if we have it, some of the demographic information of the owners. And I think that's a story that I think we say in passing, but be able to say that we're, I'm going to make things up here, but primarily, and Jen, I know you don't like this phrase, but small businesses or family-owned businesses, I think is important, but also describing the diversity of those businesses. I appreciate having talking points to be able to say to the community or to others. Again, thanks for all the work. I love the website. I did see an advertisement, so I had been on the website, and so I appreciate all that. But I would personally love more talking points. So.
Before we continue on with discussion, let's quickly go to public comment. I don't think it'll interrupt us much. Anyone? Nope. Seeing none, we'll return to discussion. Now you can do questions or comments.
I'll just point in there that I like I was taught the phrase independently owned businesses was better because we don't want to think of a business as small. They could be as big as they want, even though they're still, independently owned. So, but I am really, really grateful, that this is very near and dear to my heart, and I'm so impressed and thankful for all of the work that you're doing and have done, and I can't wait to see this just grow and blossom further. So I'm super excited about it, and great job. Thank you
so much.
Actually, maybe might be an esoteric question, maybe not. There's a large structure on Cleveland that's been redeveloped sort of episodically or in phases over the last, 2 or 3 years. I think one of the businesses that was coming in was, and I won't know the correct term probably, but kitchen for rent, if I recall correctly. And so I didn't know, Cleveland's kind of its own satellite, but with the kitchen for rent there, I didn't know if there was any way to maybe approach those who rent the space and somehow tie them in to the San Paulo and Solano commercial area. I don't know what that would look like, but since they're in the food service business and we have a pretty vibrant food sector, and that could potentially be a source of new businesses as well.
Yeah.
I don't know what else is, it's a big building. I don't know if that's the only thing that's going on in that building or if you know more about what's going on in that building.
Not at this time, but I'm happy to find out. That's exciting.
Yeah. It was quite a project that they did to redevelop it. Thanks.
Yeah, and for me, just a quick couple things, maybe just a springboard off Vice Mayor Mickey's comment around demographics. When I was looking on the website earlier and I seen the tab that said demographics, I was hoping or expecting to see like demographics of businesses and not just the drop-down menu of what we see when we look at like census tract data, but you know, as someone who previously had their own business, as myself, that would have been really like cool information to know, like what am I getting into, and what are the other businesses, what are their demographics look like in terms of ownership, who will I be mixing and mingling with or potentially collaborating with along the business corridors. My other thought, maybe half question, half suggestion, but I know you'd mentioned the Solano Stroll, which was fun. I know my son, aka the little germ ball, really enjoyed it. And I seen Councilmember Hanson Romero running around and taking care of business. But something that came to mind as I was hearing you speak and also talk about the e-gift card program was perhaps there's opportunity there to leverage in collaboration with Solano Avenue Association and getting creative and thinking, how can we get those same folk that come to the stroll to come back again through some type of voucher or gift card program that's redeemable weeks after the stroll. That way, the business, that peak business that a lot of folks are getting during Solano stroll kind of feels like it comes back in staggered segments in the future. I think that would be a really dope concept, but also a nice way to support our local businesses.
Yeah, that's great.
For my part, I'll echo what everyone else has said. This is a great amount of work that we really appreciate. It's obvious it has been a real success on all of the programs that we've tried to implement. I will echo that it's always great to have more talking points about how good we're doing, especially when they're this positive. And I'll say on one of the last points you highlighted of that we have more businesses licenses out than we did in 2019 is a amazing statistic to be able to highlight of how resilient we have been, and in a time when I think a lot of people probably didn't have the same amount or more business licenses out. So I think that is really great, and I'm looking forward to even more stuff coming down. So thank you.
Thank you so much, and thank you for providing these suggestions. I'm happy to kind of explore these and see what we can do. They're all things that I feel strongly about in terms of being able to offer, so happy to kind of continue this process.
Any further comments from council? Seeing none? Thank you very much. That will bring us to item 11.1, which is our new business, which is discussion and possible direction for the procedure for filling a vacant seat on the city council by appointment. And I will start on this one, and then Councilmember Jordan will fill in any details I miss. This came out of the process we had to go through during the last election cycle when we had a vacancy on the council, and the previous council had to essentially on the fly develop a method to fill that vacancy. The city council had previously put a measure before the voters that allowed the city council to adopt a policy to fill vacancies, but the city council had not done so. So we had been, for the last two vacancies, the city council had essentially designed something for that specific instance and then dealt with it as it came while not adopting something permanent. We thought on the previous council that we should definitely do that, but didn't end up adopting anything when we discussed it. So what is before us tonight, the sort of document represents mostly what we discussed at that point with a couple additions. I'll say that it's easy to get confused in this, especially as it gets so conditional on a lot of these things, but essentially we're presenting two ways of filling the vacancy. The first runner-up approach, which is when the vacancy occurs proximate to an election, meaning 45 days before or within 6 months after the certification of an election, in which case we appoint the candidate with the highest number of final votes that wasn't elected. That's what we used for this past election because it happens within that time frame of 45 days before. If it occurs outside of that time frame, the suggestion is to follow the application approach using the guidelines that we developed as part of the appointment process this last time, which includes a application period of 2 weeks before a public meeting with Q&A, and then voting on repeated open balloting. So that was determined to be the overall best way. And that is largely the same as it was presented last time. We made minor adjustments to deal with corner cases, essentially, and multiple vacancies occurring at once. So if 2 vacancies occur at once, proximate to an election, the first one will be filled by the first runner-up, and the second will be filled by appointment. That was due to the fact that if you try and do both by election, you are it's essentially impossible to get a runner-up who meets the threshold but does not get elected and is an actual runner-up. Councilmember Jordan, if you can say that better than I can.
Sure. So the idea is that the first runner-up needs to have a certain amount of voter support in order to be automatically appointed, essentially. I mean, it would still take action of the council, but that's the idea, because you don't want somebody who has very little support. You might have 10 candidates and none of them have a lot of support. So the threshold that this proposed was 3/4 of the voter support that's required to be elected. And if a runner-up receives that, then they are eligible, or that they would be appointed. Obviously 3/4, you can't have 2 people both get 3/4 of the threshold. So that's why we realized that if there were 2 vacancies, the second one would need to be filled by the other appointment process, which is application.
And do you want to briefly talk about the additional proposed recommended action?
Yeah, sure.
Thank you.
So apropos of what I just said, if there's a number of, let's say there's 6 candidates for 2 seats, the 4 candidates who are not elected could well split the vote between them so that none of them has 3/4 support at the round after which to make threshold. But it's possible that one of those candidates would have that much voter support if you continued the rounds of counting. And so the idea is, and they already do this in San Francisco, even though it's only single seat, the idea is to keep counting until there's only one candidate more than the number of seats to be elected. And that way you actually have the result, you know how much support did that candidate have among the voters relative to that threshold to win. So that is not currently required in our Chapter 7 of the Municipal Code, which is the chapter that defines how ranked choice is operated. So the recommendation was to ask staff to prepare an amendment to that ordinance to require that. I have checked the voting equipment, and it is possible. It's simply a switch that the registrar has to throw to cause it to count down. Now, our registrar hasn't been great at throwing those switches, but we have an elections commission now in the county as a consequence of a number of errors that happened in the last election, and that's only the most public, I would say, facing of the errors. There were errors in the 2020 election and back and back. So finally, we have an elections commission, and I think with that, we'll have a higher chance of the registrar actually doing what each of the registrar's clients wants the registrar to do. So that is to say, we have the capability, or the equipment has the capability, and we just need to change our ordinance to require that change so that we can get the information we need should we need to appoint.
Any questions from council?
I have questions, but I'll wait for other questions.
Go for it.
Well, thank you for putting this together. I remember listening into the previous council's conversations on this, and it made my head hurt a little bit. So it was good to see this in writing. I did wonder, had you all considered a situation in which 4 council members might actually be up for election. So a year, for instance, this coming election cycle, there'll be 3 that are up, and if, for whatever reason, Robin and I were not on council and an appointed person was, if another seat had to be filled for election. And I ask that because we end up in a very weird situation where like your threshold now becomes 15% of the voters have to have selected. And so so I'm just asking a question, if you all had considered what would happen if you had 4 open seats?
No.
Okay. And then,
Though, besides that, if you're using the appoint the first runner-up method, then if you had a vacancy in addition to the 3 people running for election in, say, next election, then it would be the person who comes in fourth.
Well, I think
Well,
what
I'm saying
what
if-
he's positing is we have 3 seats in the next election. One of the 5 of us, or I guess one of the two council members who would be running next, or running in, that's not next election, that's 2026.
sorry, so what I'm
Okay,
saying
so
is.
well, let's say one of us resigns, although
No,
that would
no,
still
no,
be
no,
3
no.
seats. One of you resigns.
If one of us
Okay,
resigned, there
right.
would be 4 seats up in
Right,
the next election.
Right, okay, right. And the way our ordinance is written is it requires consolidating all those into one election. So all 4 seats would be filled by election.
Right, and then,
Aside from
sorry,
this
and then,
process.
I guess, so, but that would mean that if, let's do a
fifth
hypothetical.
person was-
Hypothetical, my seat is up for election. Hypothetical, 3 months after the election, Robin's seat is being up for filling.
Right,
That means the person who finished 5th
right.
would have only had to have gotten 15% of the electorate's votes to, under this ordinance. Sorry, we're getting into a discussion here, but.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to check if you had thought of the really weird situation like that.
Yeah, we had not. I mean, there is a provision there, but it wouldn't come up in this situation because I think the process that we laid out was still apply, but there is a provision if something strange happens that isn't contemplated or anticipated by what is in the ordinance that's proposed, then the council will basically have to come up with a new process. But I would say getting 15% voter support, while it may sound small in that situation where a candidate only needs to get 20% support to win, and you've got 4 candidates who have achieved that, obviously they will achieve that. That's not, that sounds easy, but that's actually not that easy because, I mean, you're still trying to get 3/4 of the remainder of the voters. So the competition is still pretty substantial.
So that leads to my next question. So in the description, it says, in the document labeled Tiedemann, in the kind of in the write-up, it says, the council shall appoint the candidate who receives the highest number of final votes but was not elected, provided that said candidate receives 3/4 of the election threshold for that election. So perfect, boom, finish. It then later says, in an example, it says, in a year electing 3 council members, this would mean 4th place candidate who received votes equal to at least 18.75% of those in the first round. And I assume those means votes there. When does the candidate have to get 18.75? Is it 18.75 of the votes that were done in the first round, but you calculate 18.75 in the last round, or are you just checking the first round?
Yeah, I can see that's confusing. So the election threshold is based on the number of votes there are in the first round, active votes. As counting proceeds, voters who don't want to rank all the candidates, their vote drops out. So as you go round to round, there tend to be fewer total active votes. But the threshold remains the same. And so what we were trying to describe there is the 18.75% is of that first round active vote total. Because somebody's going to get, if you count the last candidate standing, if you count until there's only one candidate more than number of seats, they're going to get 100% of the remainder. But you want to make sure that that remainder is that percent of the first round remainder? Because otherwise you could have a candidate who has very little voter support, and they would then be into office. So I don't know if that helps. I'm a visual thinker, so.
That does help.
Okay. There's a better way to write it.
That
I'm
is
sure.
not what I read in the legalese. So, and that was just where I was like, am I reading I was a little confused on both, so this
Right, right.
helps. But I was not, I missed that. If it's in the legal document, right?
Right.
It's legally written out, I missed that.
So the legal document refers to 3/4 of the election threshold, and the election threshold is defined, as I described it in our ordinance, as that percentage of the first round vote total. What we provided in the report was examples. So what's in the actual language doesn't refer to those percentages.
I'm gonna pause and look up the Muni code again, because I looked up the definition and I was a little confused also there, so.
Sure.
But
Well,
that'll go
yeah, I
to
mean-
discussion. I can wait till
Well,
discussion.
now, if an ordinance that comes back to amend this chapter and there's a better definition, then, this is an opportunity to do other changes and cleanups. So I encourage everybody who's interested to read that chapter 7, and if you have things in there that you think could be framed better, please do.
I would,
Oh, sorry.
quickly, I'll just mention that, I'd also say that what's before us is not ordinance in full to pass, but a framework for us to direct staff to prepare an ordinance. And we originally weren't planning to present it as an ordinance, but our city manager wisely said, what if we did it this way instead? Which will enable us, if the framework we're describing sounds right, then we can make sure the legalese, when it comes back to us in full ordinance form, is looked at by better legal minds than Councilmember Jordan and I. Please go ahead.
So I have a quick question of and I mean, of course, you can't prepare for every scenario. But what if you didn't have that many candidates running?
So if and there's two different things that happen when there's the same or fewer candidates, the number of seats that I've seen anyway. One is the election happens and people vote or don't vote, but it doesn't really matter because they win a seat. The other is that under our charter refers to the state elections code for things that aren't specified under our charter. And one of the processes that the state elections code allows is for the legislative body to basically declare those candidates elected and then cancel the election. So that's what happened that happened some year. I don't remember which year. Was that 2014? I think that was 2014. Yeah. But in that case, obviously, there wouldn't be a runner-up should there be a vacancy.
And so we don't need to have any sort of additional language in there for.
Yeah, I don't know. That's a good question. If
I
there's no
don't
runner-up.
think so, because there would be no runner-up, so I think you would default to the appointment process.
But maybe a question for Mala as she looks over this thing.
I was nodding as well. I think it would default to the appointment process.
Thank you.
Getting the
Interview.
applications and the interview.
Right.
It's a good question though, because that does happen. It's about one out of 6 seats over the last 20 years have been uncontested. So that is a possibility.
So I was just as long as there's something else in place of that. I think I had another question, but I'll come back.
Other questions? We can go to public comment and come back. Do we have any public comment? That's what I figured.
I'm shocked.
Yeah. Then any other comments or discussion?
Where is
or
everybody
suggestions?
out there tonight?
Apparently they didn't find our agenda thrilling this evening.
Nobody wants to debate math.
They're all watching the Steelers.
We do have public online. It's just that they're not raising their hand to.
Then we're glad they're with us.
Yeah.
Any council discussion or suggestions or further questions?
So as a follow-up, I did read the definition, and the definition is exactly as you described. It is very specific. So I'm good with the definition, and the legalese I'm fine with the legalese.
It's challenging. As I said at the start, it is very difficult to get all this because it quickly devolves into conditionals and top of conditionals and whatnot.
Yeah, but if you do see anything in the ordinance, I mean, I was one of the lead authors, and I'm not a good writer, so so please help if help is needed.
I was going to wait till the end, but.
Unless there's any other discussion, go ahead.
So I really appreciate laying all of this out. And in particular, the appointment process. I guess the one question I have is, I understand the part from before election, part about 6 months after the election. I'm not sure if that's really the best measure of length. I'm also, I guess, of the mind of why would not the appointment process, why could not, the council could take into account how someone finished in an election when doing an appointment process. So I am nervous when it comes to math. Math, it's a little bit in a black box, but I think through our election, I understand a little better about what does that really mean, right? And I guess I would if we were to pass this, I would highly advocate to all voters that they really follow what the guides say, which is vote for as many candidates as you would be happy to see in office, not necessarily rank all of those who ran just because they ran. So that's one discussion point. The simple thing to me is let's adopt the appointment process, and one of the criteria that can be is how did this person finish in the previous election? To counter that, because this is the debate that's literally going in my mind, is you could end up in a situation where the person who finished as runner-up, because it would be the new council in all likelihood who would be making the appointment, that is asking the new council to make an appointment or have leeway in their decision in a situation where they may not have been someone, or the person who was the runner-up may not have been on the same page with what their political views were. And if the council is swung one way or the other very strongly, that could, in many ways, disenfranchise the voters in terms of their say. And so that's why I understand we are looking at this, clean and simple. You are the runner-up, you get appointed, but it makes me a little nervous with the unknowns. And in your work on this, were there any other communities that have gone this approach of saying the runner-up is the one who gets appointed?
Yeah, so actually it was former Councilmember, Mayor, Vice Mayor Nason who brought this to us. And it's from the Alameda, City of Alameda Charter, not in whole, but the concept. And I think the reason it's in their charter is because they directly elect their mayor. So they often have vacancies because a council member will run midterm for mayor, and so then there'll be a vacancy. To the concern about flipping a majority in terms of policy perspective or whatever other perspective, voter values, for me the counterpoint is if there's a vacancy and you allow the council to fill the vacancy that close to election, then the council can use it to create a supermajority. And I'm more oriented to the diversity of perspective than I am to facilitating a supermajority. I mean, you're essentially relying on the the democratic principles of whatever that majority is at the time, not to take power for itself. And I don't have much faith in that. So,
I'll add that, as you know from watching it, when we discussed this originally, there was discussion of we're trying to keep the will of the voters in this process, in a process where it is very difficult to do so. And there were suggestions of why not a special election. And as I made the point then, special elections aren't really democratic for a variety of reasons because it's very hard to get people to participate. So the goal of the appointment based on runner-up is as close as we can get to the ideal of a special election, of we are trying to directly translate the expressed will of the voters into who sits on council without, that danger of the council editorializing of who they want in that seat. And I think that there's a powerful argument for the procedural fairness of that. And it does lead to a lot of unknowns, but I think there's no way for this process not to have some unknowns because it is such a difficult to deal with process for the body just by its nature.
I have one other question, just playing devil's advocate here again. It's always fun. So let's say, take, in my case, let's say, okay, I'm being offered to be appointed now, right? And maybe I decide, no, I don't want to. Maybe I denied that. Then where would you go to? Would I forfeit, if that person were to forfeit, then where does that go with the numbers and the next person?
That's a good question. Yes, I mean, what's proposed is there wouldn't be another first runner-up. I mean, unless we went back to the prior round, which I wouldn't recommend. That just gets too complicated.
Right.
So I think thank you for raising that. So I think that's something that maybe should be written in is, these cases, if they forfeit in the case in the case there is no first runner-up and or the candidate who's eligible forfeits, then it would go to the other, it doesn't accept the seat, then it goes to the interview process. Yeah. I think in terms of appointing the first runner-up, what transpired, I think is an interesting case history in its own right, which I presume you all followed, but at the time, I think I was mayor. So at the time I proposed the appointment, I came in proposing the appointment, the interview process, and at the time, I think Councilmember Lopez was the first runner-up at that point in the counting. And I wasn't really aware of this, appoint the first runner-up, but I wouldn't have done that anyway, because obviously I supported Councilmember Lopez, so that would have been anti-democratic on my part. To Councilmember Nason's credit, she came in recommending this process from the city of Alameda, even though, if my understanding is correct, she did not endorse Councilmember Lopez, but she said, look, this is what the voters want. And then during the counting, the whole thing flipped, but we all ended up here as it is, and I think it's really great because we have the diversity of perspectives that we have. So I'm incredibly happy with how it turned out. But I think I just put that forward because you can see how complicated it can get and how letting the voters will come forward creates that diversity of perspective that I think benefits the city. Whereas who knows what would have happened if I guess it would have been the four of us. I don't know what would have happened I don't know what would have happened. It would have been a mess. So I'm just so grateful that she brought this to us and that it went the way it went.
Yeah, well, I'll add, don't think any of us were looking forward with a lot of excitement to going through the application process and actually having to do that vote because it seems just not good. Like, I don't think there's a way for that to be great. And so if there's a cleaner version that just says, we have a person, we have that person has significant support, they have passed this benchmark we've set, they have the support of a significant portion of voters, there we go, easy.
So I had, so in terms of the runner-up, I think we've covered everything that I had concerns about. I did have a question about timing. So the timing says, council will say you have 2 weeks to apply. When does that start? So when can council actually say we are accepting applications? Is it at the point in which a council member says they are stepping down, or is it at the point that the council member has stepped down? So I know, like the previous council couldn't really have conversations till Janelle actually stepped down. And so I just wanted a clarification. I'm trying to think of timeline, like how long is the lead time? Do you have to wait for a sitting council meeting, or can you have a special meeting, or do you wait until the passing? So I was just wondering what that timeline looks like.
And Mala, if you want to jump in at any point, but I'll say that, so all of this is with the background of you have 60 days from the time the seat becomes vacant to appoint before it defaults to the mayor making an appointment. So that's the overall time period that you have to work within. We, in this, purposely defined the sort of 2-week application period and then didn't set sort of dates following from that for all these other things to allow some flexibility and, with the overall lack of flexibility if you've got to do it in 60 days. I would assume that it would probably be a special meeting as soon as possible, but it's a good note that we could maybe add in there of with all alacrity or something like that.
Yeah, I'm not remembering the process well enough. So I guess there's a requirement to define the application. Is that in there? I think the council has to define what information it wants, if I recall correctly.
Yes.
My first response was, well, there's a vacancy in this. When the 2 weeks starts, whenever the city clerk puts out the request for applications, so it's sort of automated in that way. But then I realized, yeah, but what's the application?
Yeah, so it says an application will be developed and distributed. So it does not specify all that of, I think my ideal intention is that, there is some time, not a ton of time, to design that application, bring it to a special meeting, launch that application period at that meeting, have the 2-week period, then schedule a special session or include it in a regular session to do the Q&A, everything else like that. And that's largely what we tried to do last time. If we pretty quickly had a special meeting, we talked about what the process would be, then we were going to have another one to launch the application and discuss what would be in it. And we got pretty far along in some of that, right? Mala, anything to add? Are we getting anything wrong?
No, you're absolutely correct. The only thing I was going to say to, I think, Vice Mayor Mickey's comment about could we start the process before the resignation is effective, the risk is that the council member rescinds their resignation. I mean, I haven't seen it happen. Typically, resignations are for various reasons, and so they feel pretty solid about that, and they pick their date for specific reasons as well. But that would be the only risk.
Okay. I mean, in my mind, it would be great to be able to have it start as soon as the resignation is official, so it's, their last meeting or whatever it is, because that means the time between there being a vacancy and that seat being filled, we can minimize. And I get that we have 60 days or, but like, I'm just imagining a situation where, the council member is resigning, their last meeting is the last meeting in July, and then we've got August recess, and then it's like, so like it could stretch out. And I really hope that as we pass this ordinance, we can work with the city clerk to have an application process prepared way in advance of any of this happening, as opposed to asking the city clerk to prepare an application in a short amount of time with who knows what else might be on their plate. Yeah, no, thank you. So again, these were just the what ifs that came across my mind. With that, I'm good on the discussion part.
I mean, it sounds like it would be a useful clarification to state that the council will, consider and adopt the application in a meeting. I don't know if that has to have a timeline, but I think that's a useful clarification to include.
Yeah, something to the effect of from the point of resignation, the council will have a meeting to discuss and launch the application within a week, 2 weeks, something like that.
Yeah, because if it's within 2 weeks, and the application period is 2 weeks, then the council could consider it, it could be on a council agenda 5 to 6 weeks later.
Right.
So you might have up to 2 meetings where you have less than 5 council members. If the vacancy occurs in July, then all that can happen in August.
Right.
I mean,
Then
yeah,
you got to have a special meeting.
you can have, you have a special meeting in early August, and that's actually not a bad scenario, because then you go one, you have fewer meetings without full strength.
Any further discussion? Do we need a motion on this? Yes? Okay. Do I hear a motion from anyone?
So I will move to ask staff to prepare an ordinance specifying the method of appointment as laid out with the modifications that have been discussed. And hopefully some people can make amendments to add those modifications as they see fit. And I don't know if I should make a separate motion regarding the rank choice or include it, okay. And ask staff to prepare an ordinance amendment or an ordinance amending Chapter 7 of the Municipal Code to specify that election results in Albany will be counted down to 1 runner-up.
I will second. If there's no further discussion, City Clerk, could you please call the roll?
Sorry, I didn't hear the second.
Me.
Councilmember Jordan,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Mickey,
Yes.
Councilmember Lopez,
Yes.
Mayor Tiedemann,
Yes.
Councilmember Hanson Romero.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you all very much. With that, we will go to council subcommittee reports and regional bodies. And I did not bring a way to randomly generate who will go first, so I will. There was a mayor's conference on September 13th where we were hosted by the city of Emeryville. They talked about a couple things. One of them, the League of California Cities, referenced ACA 13, which is a constitutional amendment that I believe passed both houses recently that raises the bar for raising the voter threshold to a supermajority. So to raise the threshold to a supermajority for ballot measures, you need to have a supermajority to pass it, is how it's written. So sort of being consistent. And they were urging supporting of that. And then we had the Air Quality Resources Board briefly present. They have gone through a lot of changes and have a lot of new executive officers, new business plans, strategic plans, so a lot of interesting things happening. There was also an ABAG Housing Committee meeting, which I unfortunately missed, but watched, and we will confirm the results of at the ABAG executive meeting later this week. The main thing of discussion there was the BAFA regional bond, which is coming up. They are working on the BAFA portion of that. As is planned now, 20% of those funds will go to BAFA to regionally distribute, with the goal of creating a sort of self-sustaining housing finance authority like what New York has, that does not need to go to the voters every time to get taxes to fund new affordable units. And they're discussing how the first tranche of that regional money will be prioritized, which is very exciting. With that, Councilmember Jordan?
Yeah, I have a question. So I had an email about the prospective regional bond measure. I sent back a question, haven't heard back yet, so I'll ask it here. I don't expect you to know the answer. Do you know what the annual, well, I guess the first annual, because it changes as assessed value goes up. Do you know what the first annual payment would be per $100,000 or $1 million of assessed value?
I do, in fact, have a ballpark of this, thanks to our community development director who attended a meeting about it earlier, just today, which I assume this is for the $10 billion
the
size
whole
bond, and
thing,
is,
yeah.
a ballpark,
Right.
but about $100 per $1 million of assessed value.
Okay, all right. Sounds reasonable. Easy for me to say, given my economic position, but yeah, that seemed pretty critical. Thank you.
Yep.
I guess I'll go ahead, and there was a meeting of it was PPLC, I can't remember, Planning Policy Legislative Committee, I think, of the Alameda County Transportation Commission. A main item of interest there was there was a state bill to prohibit motorists from parking within 20 feet in advance of an intersection with a crosswalk, which essentially almost all intersections have crosswalks, whether they're painted or not legally, as well as 20 feet after, which concerned me because that's like most of our short blocks, or a lot of our short blocks, and I didn't really understand the rationale for the after anyway. Fortunately, so it originated in the Assembly. Fortunately, it went to the Senate, and somehow it got amended in the Senate to remove the 20 feet on departure. So it's only a 20 feet on approach, which comports with what Albany's policy already. So that's convenient. Something else I'm working on in the body is looking at how MTC averages the pavement condition index numbers. So these are the numbers that each city is required to collect regarding the quality of pavement. And then MTC averages those, puts out an average for each city, and cities are supposed to have an average of 60. If they don't, I don't really know what the consequences are. But the way MTC averages those is it makes no distinction between arterial roads and local roads, even though arterial lanes have 10 times the use. So if you've got a pothole in an arterial lane, it's hitting 10 times as many people as a local lane. So I've been apprising the body of that, and the Street Saver, which is the pavement management program, actually has weighting factors in it. So it's even stranger because the pavement management program has weighting factors, but then they don't use those weighting factors in calculating the average. So I'm slowly bringing the commission up to speed on that, towards the point of maybe getting it to change the averaging, or it can't change the averaging methodology. We passed a resolution saying to MTC, change the averaging methodology so it matches what users do and what your pavement management software requires. And it doesn't make any difference for Albany, as it turns out, but it makes a huge difference for Oakland and San Leandro. So their arterials are in much, much better condition than their local streets. So it would up their average, and as I say, appropriately so, because those streets are the ones that get the most use.
So I did attend a stopwaste.org meeting just this past week, and it's, I have to say, once again, I'm super impressed with the work that they're doing there, and the partnership programs that they're working with the school districts in order to bring more information about, the sorting. And I was mentioning to Nicole, there was a special presentation on one school district, I believe it was in Fremont, I could be wrong, maybe Newark, but anyway, they were going to try to resend that presentation out, but it was basically based upon all of the knowledge and information, and working collaboratively with the schools themselves, that this one school was able to completely reuse, recycle, compost, and only be left with like a mason-full jar of actual trash, that was actually going to go to landfill. It's apparently, haven't seen it myself, but this is the presentation I was being told about, and I'm curious to see how that can further develop the more education that's brought into the schools. They partner and work with them one-on-one. I do know that Albany did receive a grant, which I think I spoke to before in a past meeting, but a grant to get a commercial dishwasher in so that they can use the reusable trays for the cafeterias. But there's a lot of additional opportunities with just partnering and continuing to grow that education in our community. And for anybody who hasn't been on it, I encourage you to go onto the stopwaste.org website and take a look at all their different partnership programs, educational information, and I'm looking to try to continue to connect them to other sources. I've suggested that they partner in also with maybe some of the scouting organizations, and also maybe to do some stuff as well with our senior community and kind of bridge that gap as well. So anyway, I'm just really impressed and encouraged by the amount of work that they're doing and the resources that they have to support all of these programs.
So nothing to report back for Gilchak Farm, other than, as I mentioned last time, planning for their annual Harvest Festival. For the Mosquito Abatement District meeting, I unfortunately had to miss the meeting due to other prior engagement and conflict. However, I did review the meeting notes for that meeting, and unfortunately still continued rising cases of West Nile virus detected in birds and mosquitoes in the county. Fortunately, no reported service requests for the city of Albany. Still don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. If anyone's watching, it looks like we got 9 folks online. Please, if you see mosquitoes that may look like a problem, give a call. That's what our county services are for. Additionally, I do believe I'd mentioned last week or last time about the intent to conduct fogging measures. Sounds like that did go forward in Livermore. Again, it's just a reminder to be a bit more vigilant in our community about the presence of mosquitoes. And lastly, was really happy to see the representative for the board at the Solano Stroll. It felt good that someone was talking to my wife and my 13-year-old about what I try to talk to them about, but doesn't come off as nerdy. I think they walked away learning a lot about genetically modified mosquitoes and how that is a necessary act in order to help control reproduction of problem mosquitoes.
There was not a meeting of the East Bay Sports Field Recreation JPA, and the League of California Cities had no events since our last meeting, although their conference starts this Wednesday. So,
Go for it.
Yeah, sorry, I recalled something else I should relay. So staff wisely suggested that I contact the trustees of AUSD regarding the potential multi-use path along Jackson that was in the agreement between the city and UC Berkeley that we approved, I don't know, before the break. So I did email individually each of the trustees, and I received, well, as a result, I had a joint meeting, as it turns out, with Trustee Davidson and Trustee Kahn. Trustee Rosenbaum responded that he's thinking about it. I did not hear back from the other trustees.
Great. Are there any public commenters wishing to ask any questions on this item? Seeing none, that will bring us to future agenda items. Are there any council members with future agenda items? Seeing none, is there any member of the public?
Actually, I'm interested in the council provided direction, I think in October of 21, to develop a whole block electrification program with the goal of identifying blocks that both have naturally occurring affordable housing and are in a position in the gas distribution network where if that entire block was electrified, that portion of the gas network could be cut off. Staff's been doing great work on that, and I'm hoping that it's coming to a point where it will come back to, I think it probably should go to the Climate Action Committee first and then come to this body, because I'd really like to have the opportunity to move that forward with Measure DD funding. And it was, the direction was given in that context of, this is a program that could be stood up using that funding.
Sounds good. Any further? Then that brings us to our announcement of city meetings and events. I'll ask everyone to take a look at the calendar and attend any city meetings that catch their interest. I'll also note not on here is our town hall on the Albany Twin, which is on October 5th. I encourage anyone interested to go to. With that brings us to adjournment. Thank you to all the other members of the City Council, Vice Mayor, City Clerk, City Manager, City Attorney, all the staff who are with us, and any members of the public who are here joining us. And we are adjourned.
You can bank the half hour against the.